What's up, Otakuans? Welcome back to another episode of the Manga Corner. We're hopping right back into our Rising of the Shield Hero volumes review with the second volume of the series. As many of you already know, season 3 of the anime did start a couple weeks ago, so the race is on to catch up to the anime by the end of the season. Stick with us to see how fast and how far we can go and see if we can catch up. If you do enjoy this and the rest of our content, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so that you can continue to impress your otaku buddies with just how up to date and in the know you are of the anime community. So let's resume this story of legendary heroes and ways of destruction with Rising of the Shield Hero Volume 2. Prologue, Shared Pain. The prologue of this novel follows the opening scenes of episode 5, where we see our young heroes being rewarded for their efforts during the first wave, though in the anime we get to see an upcoming character that has not yet been introduced, versus in the novel we start with our two main protagonists, Naofumi, the shield hero, and his sword, Raphtalia, waking up in one of the storage closets in a castle. The conversation surrounding the payment of the shield hero remained mostly the same, just a bit more dialogue from Bitch, the princess of this kingdom, aka mine, trying her best to discredit the shield hero, but ultimately she fails. The two protagonists then leave the castle and have the same conversation on their way to the slave tent about how Raphtalia wants to replace the now dissolved slave press so that Naofumi can fully trust in her. Chapter 1, Egg Machine. Chapter 1 continues in the prologue. The two have now arrived at the slaver's tent. In the novel, the slave trader goes on and on about Raphtalia's development from his care to Naofumi's care, and this becomes annoying to Naofumi. The trailer only refers to her as property, where it doesn't matter if she lives or dies, as long as you utilize them in a way to raise their value, then that's what matters. When the trader moved on to offer a price for her, in the novel it seems Naofumi really considers it, even mentioning the possibility of purchasing that level 75 Wolfman from his last visit. But Raphtalia quickly shuts it down, assuming Naofumi is just messing with her, though he admits to himself he can't get rid of the one person who believes in him. During this exchange, it is also noted that Raphtalia's attack power seems to be over his own defenses, and that's honestly a blessing. He finally tells the trader he couldn't sell her since he sees her as his own daughter now, which received a negative reaction from Raphtalia. The conversation then moves on to reapplying the slave crest, and also info about the castle, how also they utilize arguably the most slaves out of everyone in the kingdom. Of course, Naofumi finds this hypocritical and curses the spirit hero for his idiocy on the whole matter. The next important detail left out of the anime was details of the shield and abilities that Naofumi unlocked when he added the slave ink to his shield. As mentioned, he did unlock the shave user shield, but with that he unlocked the abilities Slave Maturation Adjustment Small and Slave Status Adjustment Small. He then unlocked the Slave Maturation Adjustment Medium, though it's not talked about much, and it will soon come into play once he mixed in a bit of Raphtalia's blood. We then move on to the monster eggs. Though a bit more dialogue in the novel, the conversation flows the same to the point Naofumi purchased one of the eggs and applies the slave crest. He threatens the slave trader that he'll return if the egg ends up being a dud. Chapter 2, Gratitude for Life. The next chapter follows along with the anime, where Naofumi speaks with both the apothecary and the magic shop owner, where he receives gifts for his heroic actions at Zas Village. Following this, the two discuss having to study the book received and learn the magic the hard way. We also find out there's approximately 45 days until the next wave, so they have a bit more time than they had last time. In the next scenes of the anime, we kind of speed run many of the events that happen next. We follow the two as they set off to Ryu for training and also to check on the villagers. En route, Naofumi adds new materials to his shield to unlock even more abilities, such as the mortar he received, unlocking more compounding recipes, and also the monsters that lay still strewn out in the fields, unlocking even more defensive bonuses, agility, poison, shadow, and rot resistances, and even some attack abilities to stun or paralyze his enemies. Though he did unlock his Chimera shield from absorbing last wave's bosses, he was still too low level to use it. The two reach Ryu and provide assistance for the day towards their rebuilding efforts. In the evening, villagers assist the two in learning to read their language. Chapter 3. Filo. Chapter 3 begins in the novel the next day after the two reach Ryu. In the anime, we go from their discussion about learning to read the book, then to see a quick glimpse of Ryu, then to the bedroom of the young heroes. Once the egg they receive hatches, the two are immediately at a loss for what type of monster it is. Just like in the anime, it was love at first sight for the monster in Naofumi. Naofumi believes it simply because he already added her to his party and applied the slave crest. He then absorbs some of the shell into his shield, unlocking the monster egg shield, and it gives him not only another cooking skill upgrade, but also monster maturation adjustment. The two then walk around the village where they find out that it's a Filolial from the Filolial rancher nearby, where they also get some quick tips for raising it. Again, the anime chooses to speedrun the next scenes, but in the novel, Naofumi actually names her Filo after finding out what she was and takes his now two companions out for training. After only a few days, Naofumi was level 23, Raphtalia 27, and Filo 12. Once they returned to the inn, the keeper was the one who pointed out how fast she's grown, and Naofumi notes that he is using his maturation adjustment skill, but also that it may be trouble in the future if she grew too quickly but didn't mature as fast. Chapter 4. Growth. Our next chapter really focuses on the growth of Filo over the next few days. While some scenes were shown in the anime, during those speedruns, the majority of this chapter was left out. Just to recap some key points, the group level was now Naofumi 25, Raphtalia 28, and Filo 15 in just 24 more hours. Filo has also grown to the size of an adult Filolial. Her eating has become more and more of an issue, where she's now losing value in Naofumi's eyes for the amount of time and money he has to invest only into keeping her fed and happy. One bonus to her now full size is now it's possible for Naofumi to ride her and see how fast and comfortable of a ride she provides. And lastly, how needy she was. Even at night, she demanded him to stay with her till she fell asleep. What had he gotten himself into? Chapter 5. Kick and Run. Overnight, it seemed that Filo grew even bigger. She seemed to be as tall as the biggest Filolials he'd seen back at the castle. Though she had gotten bigger, Naofumi felt as though the growth spurt was finally over, but next started her newest obsession, pulling carts. The villagers reminded Naofumi that Filolials had a passion for cart pulling and offered to give them a free cart if they helped transport items. After agreeing, we then regroup with the anime following the scenes of Matayasu's and Bitch's arrival in the Kree. The only key difference in this scene was while in the anime, Mine received the parchment and then immediately challenges Naofumi to the race. In the novel, she tells the villagers to race her, and then when they said they'll use her fastest monster, she then says Naofumi must race for the village with his Filolial. Moving on to Matayasu being kicked by Filo. In the novel, he goes on and on about dragons are cooler and how Filo looks cheap right before she kicks him. While the anime makes it less vague, here she clearly kicks him in the crotch, nearly crushing his family jewels. Matayasu's and Naofumi's race remained largely the same, except for Filo back kicking the soldier who created the second hole right before the two won the race, which, may I add, was a large margin, not as close as shown in the anime. Following, the scenes again are consistent, except with the magic shop owner calling Mine out and explaining the shield's party's magic attributes, thus impossible to have done any of that. One thing the anime adds that did not happen is Filo's next transformation to a more round build. In the novel, Bitch just claims they cheated, while in the anime, Filo's transformation was her excuse. Being that the village already had given the hero the wagon in exchange for help, the governor instead offers him the traveling trader passage. The party then stays long to fulfill their promise to transport supplies when the group discovers Raphtalia's motion sickness. Over the next few days, they do their best to help her get over it, seeing they'll be using this as their main mode of travel from now on. Chapter 6. Wings. Something that I have yet to mention and wasn't mentioned at all in the anime is the constant sounds of bones cracking and creaking Naofumi was hearing from Filo. At this point, the crew has done some leveling up again. Naofumi, 26, Raphtalia, 29, and Filo, level 19. But Naofumi was only able to level up his stat boost effects. The next morning, Naofumi finally notices a transformation had finally completed in Filo, and she had grown to the full size that we see in the anime. With this discovery also is the discovery that she had been eating all of the drying chimera meat, which explains the sudden change in her appetite. Because the two were at a loss for what was happening, they agreed to go to the monster trader for answers. En route, Filo's legs became even more shorter, though this didn't affect her speed at all. At the monster trader's tent, he also had no clue what was going on, but asked to keep her while he does some research. After a quick threat, Naofumi agrees. Filo protests loudly, and the two leave her with the trader. But not too much later in the evening, the trader sends an attendant for the two to return so he can come get his monster. Filo had broken 3 cages and sent 5 servants to the hospital, along with injuring 3 other monsters. Though the trader wasn't able to get any for sure info, he does suspect that Filo may be the rare king or queen of her tribe of monsters. And though he would love to be able to, being how much he liked Naofumi, he could never manage to sell her to anyone else. Just then, a sound is heard and Raphtalia covers her mouth in shock. Following her gaze, he finds the cage Filo was once in now has a naked girl with wings, glowing in a white light. Chapter 7, Transformation. Transformation begins somewhat how episode 6 of the anime begins. After leaving the slave tent, the party goes to the weapon shop in the middle of the night, waking the shop owner. Following the intro, the conversation pretty much follows the anime. Since it was so late at night, the keeper advised the group to return later, so the group returned to the slave trader's tent. There, the slave trader wanted to fish out information of how Naofumi achieved this for his Filolial, and if not, if he could raise another Filolial for him. They leave shortly after and head to the inn where he pays for an extra person and comes to realize his evenings of studying and compounding are over. Filo is like a small child and she has the energy of a 10-year-old. By the next morning, he was forced to enact a slave curse, but came to realize that it wasn't strong enough to control this monster. Chapter 8, Carro and Stick. Our next chapter was fairly short and quick, so short it was reduced to a quick flashback at the beginning of episode 6 of anime. The scene follows the morning scene where Filo refuses Naofumi's orders, and even though he enacts her seal, it has no effect. This of course pisses Naofumi off, so he drags her to the slave trader's tent immediately so that he can fix the issue. Just as we saw in the flashback, the slaver explained that she's too powerful for the current seal and will need a more advanced one. After much protest, the new seal was placed, and Filo finally understood that she couldn't decline Naofumi's orders any longer. Chapter 9. They call it a slave. The group then returns to the weapon shop, and he directs them back to the magical shop owner, where we continue in the anime. The owner promises that she can make the clothing that they need, but she will need a special magical ore found in a nearby dungeon. The group plus the magician set off to the dungeon, where they ran into the voiced Gengars that whispered terrible lies into victim ears. Absorbing these bat-like monsters unlocked the voiced Gengar shield that Naofumi uses to defeat the new monster at the end of the episode. Though Naofumi did absorb the monster in the ore, it wasn't enough to unlock any additional shields. The chapter closes out with Naofumi dealing with the witch to get the magical thread, ordering the clothes from the tailor to be completed, Naofumi upholding his promise to the weapon shop owner to cook for him since Filo ate his lunch, and Naofumi looking into the curse series of the shield from the help screen. At first it reads, should not be touched, but after a moment then reads, delivers extraordinary power and grief to its holder, should not be touched. Chapter 10, Traveling Merchant. The party returns to the tailor the next day to pick up Filo's clothes. The scene is pretty much the same as in the anime, and when they leave, they run into the witch from the magic shop on the way back to Ryu. The group offers her a ride with them back to the village. Raphtalia has started to get over her motion sickness by staring out at the horizon. Once they get to the village, the witch gives the group 25 silver coins for the ride. Naofumi wonders if he could also make money off of this. He explains to the rest that he wants to be a traveling merchant, focusing on medicine and transport. They spend the rest of the days helping to transport items for the villagers and conducting motion sickness training for Raphtalia. Chapter 11, Travel by Carriage. A few days have passed and the village has gifted the group with a new carriage for their adventures, and Filo is nothing less than ecstatic. The villagers seem to be genuine about how they feel and are returning it in kind. The cheering was simply something Naofumi will simply have to get used to from now on. As the crew prepares to set off, they discuss the new plans of traveling merchants. As you saw in the anime, Raphtalia was to perform the customer service part while Naofumi stayed hidden and also kept the stock, since they were also first to try their hand at selling a variety of medicines. Later that evening, the girls argue again about the roles in the family. While Filo feels Raphtalia is more like a big sister, she would much rather be seen as the mother, for reasons. Chapter 12, Rumors of the Heroes. Our 12th chapter follows the scenes we see from the episode 6 of the anime, where Filo overtakes a man while the group travels through the mountains. Just as we saw, he is quickly trying to get back to his village with the medicine. Following helping the man and his mother, the group continues on their travels, next delivering letters and parcels from village to the next. After 2 weeks of traveling like this, the group soon built up the reputation of the traveling merchants with the large bird that sell everything, and with a good name came even more good business. Through his travels and dealings, he gained even more knowledge, such as the normal rotation of monsters from location to location, the better to train, and a better understanding of the whereabouts and happenings of the other 3 heroes. As for their levels, Naofumi, 34, Raphtalia, 37, and Filo, 32. Once Naofumi had a solid grasp on the contents of the book he received from the apothecary, he allowed his shield to absorb it and unlock the book shield. We see he sometimes changed his shield to this for convenience in the anime. We also unlocked the torrent shield after absorbing a torrent monster, and this provided him with a plant classification, intermediate compounding, and rookie compounding, all which he had expected to receive from the book. And the other shields he had gotten from compounding and absorbing, which provide the skills attack from plant monsters decreased by 5%, medicine shield, increase of medicine effective range, fire resistance, and attack from insect enemies decreased by 3%. During this time, Raphtalia was also improving. She pretty much had gotten the hang of the magic book they had received. Jealous of this, Naofumi decides to ask Filo for some tips on using magic, but he couldn't make heads or tails of what she was trying to tell him. He even feared that even once he masters reading the book, he may not be able to use magic. Maybe he should invest in some crystal balls for himself. At this point, it's about staying alive. Eventually, he broke down to ask Raphtalia for tips, and though better than Filo's, still impossible to follow. He was no closer than he was before. Chapter 13, Take Everything But Life. En route from one town to the next, the group again passes somebody on their travels and again offers them a ride. We have reached the scene with the traveling merchant that we see from episode 6 of the anime. The conversation and events align pretty much with this chapter in the anime. The group finds out about Filo's new moniker, the Bird God, and how there's rumors of their travels, showering miracles everywhere they go. Unlike in the anime, Naofumi and an accessory dealer discuss Naofumi's current stock and progress now. Here is when the dealer also taught Naofumi about imbuing his magic into accessories that will give the wearer its effects. Doing this will also increase the value of the goods. This all leads up to when the group is confronted by the bandits as we saw in the anime. The only big difference was the bodyguard the bandits had with them actually gave the group a tough time. The rest of the bandits were weak, but this one was clearly experienced, and not until where we see in the anime where Filo and Raphtalia use magic do they take the upper hand, defeat and relieve them of their equipment and treasure. To close out the scene, Naofumi confronts the dealer, pointing out the trouble he caused him and his lowball of the wares he was carrying. He agreed to give them an expensive accessory he had and also provide Naofumi with all his trade routes. Knowing this is all a bit too much, the dealer explains it's because he respects how he works. He took everything from the bandits except for their life, so in the future, when they attempt revenge, he can make more money off of them. He then continues to travel with the group to share even more information and to teach Naofumi how to create the accessories and imbue the magic. Chapter 14, Magic Practice. Our next chapter covers the scenes that we see shortly after following the bandits incident. The trader first shows the crew where to get the magic stones they would need, then how to craft the accessories. Though not beautiful, good enough to make a magical item. Next, he attempts to teach Naofumi to imbue the stones with his magic when he realizes Naofumi doesn't know how to use magic, so he teaches him first how to first feel his magic using a stone, then to use it. Here's when Naofumi learns the Fast Guard spell, where he explains the words just appear in his vision when he uses it. Accomplishing this, Naofumi is now able to imbue his magic into the stones. Along with these new skills and knowledge, the dealer also leaves the group with a letter of introduction that opened doors to other merchants in the network, so he now had a mine he was allowed to mine higher quality ore from. With all of this at his disposal, Naofumi successfully crafts a ruby bracelet with fire resistance, but with imbuing his magic, he also lowers the quality of the item. Through crafting and mining, he managed to level up all his ore shields, but with the skills they provided, they would be in better hands for a weapon shop owner. They again continued this way of surviving until they reached a town in dire need of incesticide. Chapter 15, Why It Was Sealed. This chapter is pretty much dedicated to the opening scene of episode 7 of the anime. The group arrived to the town hearing of rumors that were in dire need of weed killer, only to find it covered in vines that seemed to be making everyone sick and also create monsters. He hears out the villager's story of the legendary hero coming to the village to solve their famine issue and bringing them this miracle seed. Knowing the origins of the seed and the possible dangers it could bring, they still choose to trust in him because he's the hero, to Naofumi's annoyance. He agreed to sell them the weed killer at a high price, to which they happily agreed, but when he tries to leave, they beg him to save their village, dear hero. And as we saw, he agrees, switches to his Chimera Viper shield, and sets off towards the monsters. Chapter 16, Invading Vines. The fight is on. Shield Hero Party versus Vines. Everything plays out just as in the anime to a T. Starting to notice a trend here, the major fight scenes remain most true to the novel. While the anime does take a few more creative liberties, the dialogue and outcome remain the same. In the final scene, Naofumi walks towards the tree monster, and since his defense is so high, the vines can do nothing to hold him back. Using his efficacy booster, he takes down the monster with one vial. Chapter 17, Improving the Product Line. This chapter is just going to be a lot of shield ability updates and modifications Naofumi made to the seeds. Following the feeding of the monster, he of course absorbs the seeds into his shield, unlocking 3 new shields, but more importantly, new skills with these shields: plant reform, intermediate compound recipes, and plant analysis. With these new skills, he first analyzes the current seed, then attempts to lower all the stats except for its growth. This lowers his SP, but creates a seed that quickly grows a plant, but then quickly dies. Noticing Naofumi mess around with the seed, Raphtalia admonishes him, and the group head back to the villagers. Later that evening, Naofumi again messes around with the seed, keeping most of his stats at a modest level, but ensuring that intelligence and mutation were kept at the lowest, and changing the special ability to quality improvement. Satisfied with this, the next morning he experimented with his growth and confirms the changes to be safe for the villagers. With the new changes, the group packs up, and along with 3 carts full of this fruit, they set off towards a village that has rumors of dealing with the infectious disease. Chapter 18, the Zas Village. First, let me say, I'm sorry to disappoint, but there was no hot spring scene here in the novel like it was in the anime. Our chapter continues en route to this next village where we gain some insight of the state of their cart. Since made of wood, it tends to break down more than they want. Naofumi plans to maybe add metal parts later. The current level set at Naofumi 37, Raphtalia 39, Filo 38. It's evening time now, and Naofumi is reminiscing about the two. He also recalls when Filo was with the slave trader. She caused the ruckus after overhearing what he was saying about her and how cheap she was. Our next scene rejoins the anime on episode 8, where we finally arrive at the village. These scenes again follow closely to the anime as Naofumi finds out about the dragon corpse and his fellow hero's part to play in this situation. The only slight difference is the doctor and nurse did not protest when Naofumi made his demand. The group now sets off towards that dragon. Chapter 19, Curse Series. On the way to the dragon, the group ran into even more monsters that he absorbed, but not for much progress for his shield. Realizing there was no end in sight, the group chose to just push past all the monsters until they found the dragon. The air reeked of poison and death, and the corpse was about 10 meters long. Due to the rot and decay, it was impossible to see what this dragon previously looked like. As they got closer, you could tell that Ren and his party already pillaged the corpse for his most valuable materials, and what's left was just awful. And that is when the corpse reanimated and attacked the group, and we see the fight play out. Though everything is pretty much a one-for-one, we do receive a bit more information about Naofumi's newest shield. Seeing Filo eaten by the dragon, her life flashes before Naofumi's eyes. Slowly, he sinks deeper into despair, and he starts to hear a voice from within. He remembers this voice, the same thing that happened back when he dueled Motoyasu. Once the Curse Series activates, on his screen Naofumi reads Curse Series, Shield of Rage, Skill, Chain Shield Attack, Iron Maiden, Special Attack, Self Curse, Burning Strength Up. Born from the Heart, Shield of Murder. Naofumi lets the shield take over his mind. Chapter 20, The Shield of Rage. What happens next is very different from how we see things play out in the anime. When Naofumi allows the shield to take over his mind, he is suddenly attacked by the Black Shadow. Naofumi fights this creature not fully seeing the form but knowing that it has ill will towards him. During the attack, he managed to send a spiral of flames towards the shadow, and it hit its arm and its tail. Now that it seems to be afraid of Naofumi, he then begins to berate and mock the shadow just before attempting to use his new skill, Shield Prison. Not fully understanding how it works, he gives up trying to activate it and instead focuses on counterattacks. When the creature came at him again, this time its arm was caught by the shield and immediately it set ablaze. The shield hero realizes the angrier that he is, the more powerful the shield gets, so he runs through a list of all the people and the things he hates from this world. He then sends black coals at his target, nearly claiming his victory when he is suddenly awoken by a soft, kind voice that says it believes in him and won't let him slip away. With this reassuring voice, Naofumi fights back against the curse and the voice in his head. When he finally gained his senses, he found Raphtalia burned, hurt, and coughing right next to him, but no enemies in the area that use fire. We then return to the anime where he attempts to heal Raphtalia and realizes he must now fight alone, and he can't use this new shield. Luckily, we then see the dragon stop moving, and soon Filo appears. After the dragon is defeated, we find out about Filo's adventure inside the dragon and the discovery of its latent magic core. Of course, she ate most of it, but she did leave some for Naofumi to absorb. To close out the scene, the group properly disposed of the corpse by absorbing what they can and Filo eating the rest, though his level isn't high enough to unlock anything. Epilogue, as a shield. This chapter of the book covers the events that happen once the group come down the mountain and get to the village. Many of these scenes were shown in the anime, but what was left out was Naofumi's and Raphtalia's talk about this new shield and how the negatives greatly outweigh the positives. Here's where we also learn that Raphtalia has cursed wounds and will require holy water from the church to be healed. We close it all out with Filo pointing out that Naofumi is for the first time genuinely smiling. And that's all there is to it. Volume 2 of the series has seriously raised the stakes while also providing Naofumi with the support system he truly needs to traverse this new world. From just last volume to this one, I'm excited to find out what would next happen and will he finally receive the happiness and joy that he truly deserves. What is it that you are looking forward to from this story? From the anime, I know I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into this Filolial story. I've already completed volume 3, so be sure to look out for our upcoming Manga Corner episodes. I hope you all enjoyed the story so far, and if you are, please leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment, even if it's to say hi, I'm here. See you next time, Otakuans. Peace.